The following program is rated 14+ and may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
An epic suspect list.
He had a dozen angry investors, and they're all conveniently out of town tonight.
A killer who can't be trusted.
The man has a long history of committing crimes and then turning around and informing to authorities.
And a hitman who's forced to improvise.
Nothing says professional hitman quite like a van wrapped in black construction paper.
In business, connections can be the difference between success and failure. In 2011, businessmen Doug Carlisle and James Henriksen are introduced through a mutual friend.
Tim Scott makes the introductions in Doug Carlisle's Spokane, Washington office. Tim has worked for Doug for years in the contracting business and knows that Doug is always looking for a good deal.
James also has a background in construction and met Tim on a job site back in the day. With their common background, the two really hit it off.
The initial opportunity seems promising. James has a deal to build roads in Russia for the upcoming Sochi Olympics. For men in construction, international contracts like that spell serious money.
Though the Russia deal falls through, Doug and James keep looking for opportunities to partner together.
James has a foothold in North Dakota's booming shale oil business. He and his wife, Sarah, relocated to North Dakota from Texas earlier in the year to build their fortune.
North Dakota's Bakken oil patch holds incredible opportunity for wealth. Throughout the region, more than 1,000 wells are producing close to 1 million barrels of crude a day. But you need to be in business with the right people. 1/3 of the oil is on Fort Berthold Indian Reservation land, so access is everything. James Trucking Company has a lucrative contract with the MHA Nation tribal chairman, Tex Hull.
Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, requires a lot of water, and Blackstone has a fleet of 100 trucks hauling water to drill sites. It's incredibly lucrative, but James is always looking to take on new partners.
Doug and Alberta have been married for 42 years and are parents to 6 grown children. They share a strong faith, which has helped them weather the ups and downs of the contracting business. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing. After a rough patch in the 1990s, Doug was forced to file for bankruptcy. And just as he was recovering, he was hit by the effects of the 2008 financial crisis. Despite a beautiful home in the wealthy South Hill neighborhood, he's desperate for that one big break.
Doug really admires the hustle he sees in James and Sarah, and decides that the North Dakota oil boom is where he'll make his fortune as well.
By 2013, Doug and James have found the perfect opportunity.
North Dakota is the new Wild West. Lots of promise, but also lots of potential for danger. With high stakes come hot tempers. And when there's a deal available, you have to jump on it before anyone else does.
Through his contacts, James gets a line on a leasing opportunity for 640 acres of prime oil field land on the reservation, and he offers the deal to Doug.
Doug recruits some other business partners to join him in forming a company called Kingdom Dynamics in order to secure the lease for the land. Doug holds 51% of the company, while James and Sarah both invest several $100,000 in the new venture. It's a life-changing opportunity.
The oil business is incredibly lucrative. The surrounding land is pumping out $250,000 a day in oil profits. But drilling is very capital intensive. The lease alone costs $2 million to secure.
The $2 million entry fee is pennies compared to the profits they'll reap, but it's a steep entry price for Doug, who's still cash poor. And that's just for the lease on the land. Once that's finalized, they'll need to drill. Each individual drill site costs up to $15 million. 8 drill sites will easily run them $100 million to set up. And they can't secure the lease until they can demonstrate that they've got the funds to drill. Still, they're going to be spectacularly rich.
Doug gets to work drumming up additional investors.
Between the money from the Henriksons and a few other wealthy contacts, Doug manages to pull together $1.6 million.
Doug has a great deal to offer anyone willing to put their money into the project. It's such a sure thing that he promises everyone 100% return on their money within 2 months.
Then he secures an angel investor who will bring the remaining $400,000 to the table, plus foot the bill for the drilling.
But the first rule of investing? There's no such thing as a sure thing. When the angel investor pulls out, Doug is left scrambling.
The 2 months come and go without anyone seeing a dime. That's never what you want from a new partnership.
By the fall of 2013, everyone is on edge. If Doug doesn't come up with that missing $400,000 quick, everyone will lose out on the opportunity completely. So they call an emergency meeting, and things go from bad to worse. Now it's every man for himself. Everyone's going to do whatever they need to do to save the deal, even if it means cutting the others out.
James finds another investor named Tormazov to fill the gap. There's just one problem. Tormazov refuses to invest in any company where Doug Carlisle owns 51%. He claims Doug ripped him off in the past. For James, it's the last straw. He begins to wonder who exactly he got into business with.
James's approach, however, is less than professional.
James confronts one of Doug's sons and demands the $400,000 that he feels Doug owes him. When that doesn't work, he tries to buy Doug out of his share of Kingdom Dynamics. But Doug flat out refuses to sell.
The encounter leaves both Doug and his son rattled. Doug channels his energy into finding someone to buy James out instead.
Doug once again hits the phones, hoping for a miracle.
Doug finds one last chance at salvation. An oil man out of Texas sees the tremendous opportunity in the land that Doug leased. He's sure it's worth $1 billion and agrees to come on board and buy out the project entirely. Their meeting to finalize the details is set for December 16th, 2013.
The day before the meeting, Doug and Alberta attend a church Christmas party.
The Carlisles are active volunteers at their church. With the holidays approaching, the church puts on a dinner as a thank you to its members.
Things have finally turned a corner for Doug and Alberta. The mood is bright as the couple heads out. They joke to each other about an odd-looking van as they pass by.
Hours later, they notice the same van on their return home.
The Carlisles get home at 7 p.m. Alberta enters the house first, through the back door, while Doug lags behind to close the gate. But as soon as Doug steps inside, a masked intruder emerges from the darkness and follows him into the house.
Alberta is halfway up the stairs to her bedroom when she hears voices coming from the kitchen. She calls out, "Doug?" and then heads back downstairs.
In the kitchen, Alberta is shocked to find a man who appears to be a cop, dressed in black tactical gear, but also wearing a balaclava, pointing a pistol right at her husband.
Alberta freezes as the man looks straight at her. This is no cop. Doug Carlisle and James Henriksen see dollar signs when they partner on a lucrative oil opportunity in North Dakota. But when Doug can't secure the financing to finalize the lease, the entire project is in jeopardy. Turning on each other, James and Doug each secure an outside investor, hoping to buy the other out.
For James, it's the last straw. He begins to wonder who exactly he got into business with.
Then, just before Christmas in 2013, Doug is confronted in his home by a man who is definitely not a cop.
A terrified Alberta takes refuge in a closet and calls 911. When the closet door opens, she's relieved to find a real cop on the other side.
The detective comforts the shaken woman as she gives him a full account of the traumatic ordeal.
She describes coming into the house and heading up the stairs, hearing voices in the kitchen, then seeing a man dressed in tactical gear pointing a pistol at her husband.
According to Alberta, the gunman looked straight at her, and her husband instructed her not to do anything. At that point, she turned and ran upstairs. As she fled, she heard 6 gunshots. She then took refuge in the closet, called 911, and waited for the police to arrive.
Alberta isn't able to provide a description of the shooter, despite reporting that she looked straight at him. But police do find other leads.
When police check the perimeter of the house, they find a man's footprint near the back gate. They also find a heavy welder's glove in the backyard. The glove is bone dry, despite the fact that it had rained earlier in the day, which implies that the glove had been left there that evening.
In the kitchen, police recover 7 shell cases from a .45 caliber pistol. They also recovered Doug's wallet, and nothing in the house appears to have been stolen. The shooting has all the hallmarks of a professional hit, except for one detail that makes no sense. Why leave the witness alive?
The implausible nature of Alberta's story puts her at the top of the suspect list.
Police need to be very cautious and thorough when they interview Alberta. As a homicide detective, you learn to spot when someone is faking their reactions or hiding the truth. But sometimes it can be difficult to tell the difference. Police need to consider the possibility that Alberta was the shooter herself, or that she hired someone to do the job. She needs to be carefully excluded from having been involved in the crime.
Lead Detective Burbridge interviews both Alberta and one of her sons. During questioning, Alberta unravels the complex web of her husband's business dealings.
Alberta tells the detective about the project in North Dakota and the months her husband has spent deal-making with investors. Lots of promises made and lots of promises broken. The Carlisle Sun describes the incident when James Henriksen burst into the office months ago, demanding money. After that confrontation, his father had taken up shooting practice, and recently, he had warned his sons, if anything happens to me, look at James.
In homicide investigations, we would consider that a clue with a capital C. When a victim names his potential killer before being murdered, we tend to pay attention. It may be circumstantial, but it's a great place to start.
But James Henriksen is not the only name dropped during the interview.
The Sun also tells the detective that, based on the mother's description, the shooter sounds a lot like Rob DeLeo, Henriksen's right-hand man.
Rob DeLeo is a known criminal in Spokane. He has a violent past, including convictions for manslaughter and drugs.
When police track down James Henriksen, he's already heard the bad news.
The detective phones James, who has already heard about Doug's death from Tim Scott. James claims that Doug owes him close to $2 million from all of the failed business deals and missed deadlines. But he denies any involvement in Doug's death, and a cell phone ping confirms that he's in North Dakota, giving him an airtight alibi. Rob DeLeo, also in North Dakota.
An angry investor who happens to be out of town on the night of the murder is one thing, but here's where it gets complicated. As the detective looks further into Doug's business dealings, he realizes that it's not just James that Doug owed money to. He had a dozen angry investors, and they're all conveniently out of town tonight.
It may just be a huge coincidence, but to a good homicide investigator, there are no coincidences, just more work.
With suspicion off Alberta, police set about investigating the shooting as a murder for hire. But as they look further into the evidence, this professional hit job starts to look less and less professional.
Besides the glove found at the scene, police also recover video surveillance footage from a school behind the Carlisle's home. The footage shows a man dressed in black tactical gear running by right after the time of the murder.
Police also learned that Alberta wasn't the only person to call 911 that night.
An hour after the Carlisles leave for church, a neighbor spots a suspicious van parked near her house. It's a white panel van, the kind used commonly by tradespeople. She notices that the van has no license plate and has black construction paper taped around the outside.
The driver is a white male wearing a baseball cap. His attempts to appear inconspicuous are failing spectacularly.
Later that evening, the woman once again sees the strange van. When it drives away, she follows it. Oddly, it just drives around the neighborhood and keeps on driving.
An hour later, the same weird and impossible to miss van is back, once again parked near her house. At this point, she's certain the driver is up to no good and calls 911.
The following day, police learn more about the mysterious vehicle.
Police canvass the neighborhood and identify more sightings of the same odd van. Some neighbors even captured it on home surveillance cameras.
From the surveillance footage, investigators are able to narrow down the van's make and model. When they run a search with the Washington Department of Licensing, they learn there are 75 just like it in the Spokane area. It's a start, but they have a long way to go.
In the following days, Detective Burbridge continues to work on clearing all of Doug's angry business partners as suspects.
With a list this long, police know there might be more people out there with information about Doug. On December 18th, 3 days after the murder, they put out a call to the public, asking anyone who had business dealings with the victim and might have something to share to come forward to the police. And it works.
But shockingly, the man who casually strolls through their door is the last man they expected to see. After Spokane, Washington businessman Doug Carlisle is gunned down in his own kitchen in a shooting with all the hallmarks of a professional job. His wife and son point the finger at his business partner, James Henriksen. Or possibly Henriksen's right-hand man, Rob DeLeo. When police learn Henriksen was only one on a long list of business partners angry with Doug, they have their work cut out for them.
With a list this long, police know there might be more people out there with information about Doug.
Until Rob DeLeo voluntarily shows up at the police station.
Rob DeLeo cooperating with the police is nothing new. The man has a long history of committing crimes and then turning around and informing to authorities.
DeLeo has served prison time on weapons charges and is known to be involved in the drug trade. He volunteers that he knows both Doug Carlisle and James Henriksen and wants to make sure police know he had nothing to do with Doug's death.
DeLeo's strategy for clearing his name starts with an unusual approach. Denying involvement in a murder nobody has accused him of committing.
When someone rushes to tell police they didn't do something that police haven't even accused them of yet, that's definitely something that would raise a few eyebrows.
Police decide to give him a polygraph. Surprisingly, DeLeo passes. But his eagerness to avoid suspicion has precisely the opposite effect. It puts him right at the top of the suspect list.
But DeLeo has science on his side.
On December 31st, the forensic report comes back on the glove found at the crime scene. There's DNA on it, but it's not DeLeo's. He's officially cleared as the hitman. Or at the very least, he's not the one who left evidence in Doug's backyard.
Investigators submit the sample to CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which is a national DNA database maintained by the FBI. If the person who owns that glove has a criminal record, he'll be in the database.
In the meantime, Detective Burbridge continues to work the case.
The detective scours social media and the internet, searching for leads. Sometimes the best detective work happens behind a computer screen. And sometimes the internet provides you exactly what you're looking for.
Burbridge finds a website called the Ripoff Report. It's a detailed account of all of James Henriksen's shady dealings and criminal history, going way back even before he set foot in North Dakota. Apparently, James Henriksen had more angry business partners than even Doug Carlisle did.
The Ripoff Report describes the Henriksens as con artists and thieves, and warns people they're dangerous.
James and Sarah have been called the Ken and Barbie of North Dakota, but it seems they were more like the Bonnie and Clyde.
The report describes Henriksen's previous felony convictions in Oregon and Washington state. It also accuses him of being directly involved in the murder of both Doug Carlisle and of another man in North Dakota named K.C. Clark. The post is anonymous. It's not evidence, but it's good information. So police now suspect they're on the right track.
In early January 2014, Burbridge pays a visit to North Dakota.
Henriksen's not talking, but Detective Burbridge finds a confidential informant who will. The man describes witnessing James wishing Doug dead on multiple occasions. He's also seen James practice forging Doug's signature on documents in his office. But even getting someone to go on the record is tough. There are a lot of people in North Dakota who are afraid of James Henriksen.
On January 10th, however, the case breaks in another direction.
The detective gets a hit on CODIS. The DNA on the welder's glove found in Doug's backyard belongs to a man named Timothy Suckow. His DNA is in the system from a stint he did in prison for burglary back in the 1990s.
Suckow is now a family man, gainfully employed, and with a wife and children living in the suburbs. There's nothing in Suckow's record that indicates any connection to Doug Carlisle. But Alberta has never heard of him. His DNA couldn't have landed in her backyard by accident.
Suckow works for a local asbestos removal company. And his company vehicle? The same make and model van seen driving randomly around the neighborhood the night of the murder.
Police obtain a search warrant for Suckow's van, his home, and his personal vehicle.
In Suckow's car, they find a police hat, just like the one Alberta described seeing on the assailant. In the center console is a handwritten list with items such as wheelman, wipe tools down, and practice with pistol. When you've got a complicated task to pull off, it's smart to write a to-do list. But maybe if the task is a murder, don't keep the list in your car for a month.
Suckow's phone reveals the link authorities need.
The contacts in Suckow's phone have a listing for James N.D. with the exact same phone number the police have been using to contact James Henriksen in North Dakota.
Suckow's phone also reveals over 100 calls and messages between him and Rob DeLeo, leading up to Doug Carlisle's murder. The same Rob DeLeo who is Henriksen's right-hand man and claimed he had nothing to do with the murder, and even passed a polygraph. But also the same Rob DeLeo who's been an informant in the past. And when they bring Rob in again, he agrees to cooperate with the police.
When Suckow learns that Rob DeLeo is cooperating, he agrees to spill as well. But Suckow's confession reveals something nobody expected. Doug Carlisle wasn't the first murder he'd committed for James Henriksen. The DNA on a glove accidentally left at the scene of Doug Carlisle's 2013 murder points to Timothy Suckow, as does the less than inconspicuous van seen driving around the neighborhood, and the murder to-do list found in Suckow's car. A search of Suckow's phone reveals a connection to the man who really no longer wanted to be Doug's business partner.
The contacts in Suckow's phone have a listing for James N.D. with the exact same phone number the police have been using to contact James Henriksen in North Dakota.
And when Suckow starts talking, he reveals just how far Henriksen is willing to go to break off business ties.
In February 2012, Suckow gets a call from Rob DeLeo, who he knows from when they worked together at the asbestos removal company back in 2007. DeLeo offers Suckow a job. The boss needs someone roughed up, and he's willing to pay a few $1,000s.
Suckow takes a train from Spokane to Willison, North Dakota on February 21st. But when he gets there, Henriksen changes the plan.
James explains that he has a beef with one of his employees, Casey Clark. Casey had followed James from Texas to North Dakota on the promise James would make him operations manager in the trucking company. But when James failed to deliver, Casey planned to quit and potentially start a rival company.
James is having none of that. He wants Casey dead. And he offers Suckow $20,000 to make it happen. And he's not about to accept no for an answer.
When Casey arrives at James' office to return his employee badge, Suckow is hiding behind the door with a weapon. After bludgeoning Casey to death, he cleans up the scene with bleach and buries the body out of town.
Casey's disappearance goes unsolved. A year and a half later, in September 2013, Timothy Suckow once again hears from his old friend.
Suckow meets DeLeo in a park in Spokane to talk about a business proposition. DeLeo's main job for Henriksen is getting a drug manufacturing operation off the ground. Henriksen has been trying to make oxy pills laced with heroin and offers to cut Suckow in as their distributor in Washington state. But during the meeting, he mentions that the boss has a business partner who's stolen a lot of money from him, and he might want the guy dead.
Suckow doesn't want to commit another murder. He didn't even want to commit the first murder. He asks, "Can I just beat the guy up?" But DeLeo indicates that he'll have to consult with the boss. A beating won't pay as much.
And now, we're negotiating.
Over the next few months, DeLeo and Suckow work out the terms of their deal.
Henriksen agrees to just a beating, but will only pay $2,000. Then he flip-flops and insists it has to be a murder. Suckow needs more than $2,000, so he agrees to do a murder, but only for the same $20,000 he was paid last time.
Henriksen thinks the job shouldn't pay as much as last time because this time it's local. Last time, Suckow had to travel.
There's nothing like cheaping out on your hitman. I guess you get what you pay for, right?
Eventually, Henriksen agrees to pay $20,000, and Suckow agrees to do the murder.
Suckow remembers that Rob DeLeo said Carlisle had stolen a lot of money. Assuming he might have cash in the house, Suckow decides to sweeten the pot by robbing his victim as well. He recruits two buddies, Lazaro Pacina and Robbie Warr, to help him in committing a home invasion robbery, conveniently leaving out the part about a murder.
Just before Christmas, Henriksen gets wind of Doug's impending meeting with an investor from Texas who will take over the deal and cut James out, and insists the hit needs to happen now.
But when Suckow said he wasn't up for committing another murder, James really should have listened.
Robbie Ware is the designated getaway driver, but he can't find a vehicle for the job. So Suckow decides to improvise and use his work van. But the van is covered in logos that now need to be hidden so as not to draw any attention.
Nothing says professional hitman quite like a van wrapped in black construction paper.
Ware drops off Suckow and Pacina near the Carlisle's back gate.
The men both have trench coats, but they're just getting in the way. So they drop them and make their way into the yard. Then Pacina realizes he's got the wrong ammunition for the shotgun. So Suckow sends him back to rendezvous with the van.
That's easier said than done, because by this point, the van is on its round the neighborhood tour, being followed by the nervous woman and caught on surveillance cameras.
In the backyard, Suckow realizes that somehow he's lost his pistol. But it's so dark, he needs to use his phone's flashlight to search around until he finds it.
When Pacino returns, he's got his hands full.
Pacina tries to hand over items to Suckow, and Suckow tries to hand them back, and somehow in the scuffle, Suckow drops the welder's glove, but it's so dark that neither of them even notice it.
After Pacina leaves again, Suckow spots Ware driving the van back and forth in front of the house. He appears to be trying to say something on his walkie-talkie, but it just comes out as static.
It's at this point that the neighbor across the street calls 911. Pro tip, if you're trying to blend in, Maybe don't make your van look like a kindergarten art project.
When Suckow encounters Alberta, he forgets all about his plan to rob the house.
After shooting Doug, Suckow flees through the back gate, runs past the school with their surveillance cameras, and somehow manages to meet up with the van.
When they search the crime scene, police find the welder's glove in the backyard, right where Suckow had left it.
The ironic part of this entire scheme, on Suckow's handwritten operation plan, the glove was just a maybe. He brought it in case he had to break a window at the Carlisle house. But the DNA on that glove led police right to him.
A few days after the murder, Suckow reaches out to DeLeo again, asking about when he'll be paid.
After all, it's Christmas, and Suckow has a family to buy presents for.
DeLeo puts him on the 30-day payment plan. He'll get his $20,000 on January 15th. But one day before payday, Suckow is arrested for Doug's murder.
On the same day, federal authorities raid Henrikson's home in North Dakota and find a stash of weapons. As a convicted felon, it's illegal for him to possess firearms, and they track him down and arrest him a few days later.
But as the case is prepared for trial, authorities learn that Henrikson's criminal enterprise is far bigger than they ever imagined. After the murder for hire of Spokane businessman Doug Carlisle in December 2013, authorities arrest Timothy Suckow as the hitman and Rob DeLeo as the middleman. But the real prize is the mastermind behind it all, James Henrikson. As prosecutors build their case, one thing is clear. Henrikson takes the concept of life of crime to the extreme, with varying degrees of success.
James is released from jail in Washington State in February 2011. After a failed attempt at becoming a drug lord in Texas, he and Sarah get married and move to North Dakota.
In December of that year, Rob DeLeo joins them. Rob and James met while they were both incarcerated in Washington State, and Rob's job is to get the drug manufacturing business up and running again.
In the meantime, James and Sarah get involved in trucking on the reservation, establishing an elaborate fraud where they get investors to put in money to buy trucks for a guaranteed high return, and then fail to pay back, claiming the trucks had broken down. All the while moving the profits around from company to company in order to hide them.
When Tribal Chairman Tex Hall gets wind of the fraud, he's furious and bans James from ever doing business on the reservation again, which is why James has Doug put his name on the new company instead.
In February 2012, when James hires Suckow to kill Casey Clark, he stumbles onto a whole new way of dealing with rivals.
Once James has successfully hired one hitman, it becomes his go-to solution. Has an old business partner been bad-mouthing you because you swindled him out of his investment? Hire someone to kill him. Is the tribal chief upset that you embezzled $500,000 from his company and knocked up his 20-year-old daughter? Try a hitman.
But murder for hire as a business model proves to be more difficult than James expects. He has DeLeo approach multiple other people about committing murder for him, but none of them actually pull it off. At one point, James even paid a Chicago hitman known as Wiz $10,000 to kill a drug rival. But Wiz pockets the money and doesn't do the murder.
So when James decides to have Doug Carlisle killed, he goes back to the source, the only hitman that's actually followed through, Timothy Suckow.
By the time James is formally charged in September of 2015, police suspect him of trying to have 11 different people killed, including Tim Scott, Tex Hall, and James's wife, Sarah. so that he could disappear with his mistress and all of the money.
Henriksen is charged with 11 counts, including soliciting the murders of Doug Carlisle and Casey Clark, and conspiring to commit the murder for hire of 4 others. But even from jail, Henriksen continues to try to buy his way out of his problems.
Randy, from the moment James Henriksen was charged in the murder of wealthy businessman Doug Carlisle here in Spokane, this whole thing really has played out like a crime novel. But tonight, with the information in these court documents right here, this whole thing just took on another scandalous turn. According to federal prosecutors, Henriksen was in the Spokane County Jail when he struck up a friendship with the inmate in the next cell. Prosecutors tell us that Henriksen eventually offered that man $500,000 if he was part of a team that helped Henriksen escape from jail. According to court papers, the plan was that a group of men would attack a U.S. Marshal's van when Henriksen was being taken to a court appearance. Prosecutors say Henriksen asked that his help use guns, grenades, and squirt guns full of gasoline to get that job done. The informant told authorities that Henriksen hoped to flee all the way to Turkey, where he had apparently wealthy relatives.
In September 2016, defendants in the case start making plea deals.
Robbie Ware and Lazaro Pacina both plead guilty to a racketeering charge in relation to the house invasion robbery that they thought they were committing.
Timothy Suckow gets 30 years for the 2 murders in exchange for cooperating with prosecutors against Henriksen.
Rob DeLeo originally agrees to a 14-year term in exchange for his testimony, but the judge rejects the deal based on DeLeo's history of brazenly committing crimes and then turning informant. He's eventually sentenced to 22 years in prison.
DeLeo is so willing to talk that at Henriksen's trial, he almost causes a mistrial when he starts testifying about crimes they haven't even been charged with.
Henriksen originally agrees to a plea as well, until he realizes that in federal court, murder automatically means life in prison. He decides to take his chances at trial, but after 5 weeks of testimony, the jury needs less than a day to reach their verdict.
I'm here in front of the federal courthouse in Richland, where things just wrapped up a few minutes ago. The jury did find James Henriksen guilty on all 11 charges against him, including the murder for hire for Christopher Clark, the man out of North Dakota, and murder for hire for Doug Carlisle. The Carlisle family was in the courtroom as the jury read the verdict. Alberta Carlisle, Doug's wife, broke out in tears and even quietly yelled yes as Henriksen was found guilty for her husband's murder.
James Henriksen receives a life sentence for his crimes, providing a small bit of closure to the families of his victims.
James's elaborate scheme to build an empire through fraud and murder ends exactly where it began, behind bars.
In the high-stakes world of oil and wealth, the stakes should never be this high. In the end, this case proves that if the deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. If you feel like being a hitman is just not for you, it probably isn't. And if you think that murder for hire is a clever business practice, you're probably behind bars.